Good evening, everyone. My name is Justine Somaji, and I'm the Regional Marketing Manager for North America at Griffith University in Australia. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions after the presentation, please feel free to follow up with me directly. This is going to be a very, very brief introduction to post-secondary options in Australia. So let's go ahead and get started. So like Canada, Australia is a very big country with a small population. Australia's population is approximately 40% that of Canada, and we have about half the number of post-secondary institutions. Australia has 43 universities, with at least one in each state and territory of Australia. As you can see from the map, most universities are located on the east coast of Australia, and that reflects the population distribution of the country. With so many options in Canada and elsewhere, you might be wondering why consider Australia for post-secondary education. Well, obviously the similarities in language, culture, multicultural society, and safety are things that come to mind when we compare our two countries. But there are a number of other things to keep in mind in Australia. Australia offers an incredible lifestyle, particularly for students. We have a high minimum wage, high standard of living, and a warm climate, which is very much conducive to spending time outside when not in the classroom. Like Canada, Australia only has a very few private institutions, and every university in Australia must take part in benchmarking activities and regular government audits. The universities operate within a very stringent framework in Australia, both for domestic education and for international education as well. Now, academic rankings, of course, are not the only thing to consider with post-secondary education, but it should be noted that Australia has a very high number of universities in the top 200 and top 100, and certainly when you consider that on a per capita basis. Griffith is a very good example of what a young university in Australia can do. Griffith was only founded in the 1970s and is already in the top 2% of universities worldwide. The portability of degrees in Australia is well known and demonstrated, both in the recognition of our degrees and also in our alumni network, and particularly within the number of Canadian alumni that all Australian universities have. There's a very straightforward transition for those with professional degrees leaving Australia and coming back to Canada, with obvious examples in dentistry, medicine and law, just to name a few. For medicine in particular, Australia offers the best match rate for residency back in Canada out of all the education options outside of Canada. And for those seeking work experience, both after graduation and while studying, Australia offers some great options there. Looking particularly at post-study options, Australia does offer a post-study work permit, depending on where the student is located. That may be 2 years or 3 years. For example, with Griffith, with students studying on the Gold Coast, students will have a 3-year post-study work permit option. Of course, the student experience both inside and outside the classroom is extremely important, and that, of course, begins with airport reception and orientation. All Australian universities offer an airport pickup service and a very comprehensive orientation that includes sessions specifically for international students, as well as all university students. Students studying in Australia can expect multiple layers of support, and I can't stress this enough. It's really going from, the overall supports available to all students studying at an Australian institution, to support specifically for international students, to supports at the course level, at the program level, and of course, peer supports. For example, Griffith has a MATES program, which is a fantastic peer support program available to students. And there are lots of clubs and societies, of course, available to students. Lots of opportunities both inside and outside the classroom in that respect. And students, of course, have a multitude of options in terms of travel while in Australia, both within Australia, to New Zealand, and of course, a little bit further to Asia. So definitely, you know, a great experience outside of the classroom in Australia, but within the region. Now, Australia, as I mentioned, does offer an abundance of work opportunities for students in Australia. So as previously mentioned, we do have the post-study work permit option, but there is also a number of options for students to work while studying. So most programs have work placements built into them. For example, at Griffith, we have work integrated learning opportunities embedded throughout all of our programs. There are also opportunities, of course, to work on a student visa. So the Australian student visa does have a built-in work permit. So students can work about 20 hours per week during study periods, and then their hours are unlimited during any break times. So Australian universities tend to be medium or large size, but what may be a little bit different from some other countries is that most universities have multiple campuses. So for example, at my university, Griffith, we have a student population of about 50,000, but that is not all on one campus. That is 50,000 students spread across 5 physical campuses, and we also have some students studying with us online as well. So at the moment, the largest campus is the Gold Coast campus, and that has about 18,000 students. So quite a different number on campus to the overall university number. You may be most familiar with the older universities in Australia known as the Group of 8, but there are a number of clusters of institutions across Australia, and every university has a number of programs that they're particularly well known for. But one thing you will find with Australia is that there are plenty of options for everybody. There is very little, I think, that would not be covered by at least a handful of institutions. Now, many of the professional programs, such as medicine and law, that often may be taught only by a Group of 8 or U15 type university in other countries, are actually taught across a number of different universities in Australia. So obviously that offers a range of different options for international students, but it also offers a different method of approaching content and also different clinical experiences. Now, similar to the UK, Australia offers very focused degrees. So bachelor degrees are typically 3 years. There are some that are 4-year honours degrees, depending on professional requirements, but 3 is fairly typical. Many professional programs, such as medicine, dentistry, physio, law, for example, can be entered directly from high school, and that is typically what Australian students do as well. So a lot of those professional degrees can be finished in a shorter period of time than would typically take place in Canada. Dual degrees are very popular in Australia, so you'll have a lot of students who are finishing 2 bachelor degrees in 4.5 or 5 years rather than spending just 3 years on 1 degree. Some of the popular combinations include business law, law arts, law environmental science, engineering business, for example. Many programs are very interdisciplinary in Australia, particularly with subject matter like health. These types of areas are studied in a very holistic way, where groups of students from, for example, different health sciences are working together as they would in a clinical setting. The application process for Australian universities is fairly straightforward, and everything is done online. Once students have submitted the application and it's been assessed, we will send out an offer letter. Students need to complete the acceptance form and send that back with their deposit, which is their first semester's tuition fees, along with their overseas health cover. And that is a government mandated health cover. It's not particular to any particular university. Once the university has processed the acceptance, we will send the student a COE, or confirmation of enrolment, and students will use this to apply for their visa online. Now, there is currently no portal through which students can apply to all universities in Australia, so students will be applying to each university on the university's website. But they can submit multiple applications if they choose to apply via an education agent. So instead of applying directly via an institution's website, students are more than welcome to go to one of our registered education agents in Canada and apply that way. It doesn't cost a student anything extra to apply via an agent, and in fact, they will save money most of the time by not paying our application fee if they apply through an agent. So no extra fees, saving a little bit of money, and they do get an extra level of support because the agents are very well trained in our processes and programs. As I said, there's no real advantage or disadvantage to applying via an agent, except that students and guidance counsellors will get a lot of extra support. But Australian universities typically will work with at least one agent in Canada. Some of us work with 2 or 3 different agencies. And this information can always be found on a university's website. Usually you can search by find a representative in my country. Now, most undergraduate program entry in Australia is based on GPA alone. There are a few exceptions to this, but primarily it is based on grades. Standardized test scores are not usually required, even for programs such as medicine and dentistry. Now, the only non-GPA requirements generally for undergraduate programs will be subject prerequisites, though many universities like Griffith are streamlining their subject prerequisites. So oftentimes now you'll find that the only subject prerequisite is Year 12 English or an equivalent to that. Sometimes there is an assumed knowledge of a science or a math, particularly for a health or science-based bachelor program, but usually the hard and fast rule is that English is what is required. Please do refer to individual university websites to find the detailed entry requirements for each program. Quite often application deadlines only exist for quota programs, such as dentistry. That's always a big example. Most programs run on a rolling admissions process, and students can apply anytime in their final year or even when they've finished their degree, their high school study. And even sometimes for quota programs, there will not be a deadline. So for example, coming into the undergraduate medicine program at Griffith, we run on a rolling applications process for that program, so there is no deadline. So that was a very quick overview. Thank you so much for your time. If you're interested in finding out more about Griffith, please feel free to contact me. I am based in Canada, right here in Ontario. So feel free to send me an email or give me a call, and I'd be happy to talk more. Thank you so much.